Thank you. So now we'll move back to our final round of paper speeches. So going back to the proposition, closing the case tonight for the proposition is Miss Lucy White. Lucy is an MPhil public policy student at Hughes Hall. She's worked in the House of Commons, Parliament and the United Nations and has delivered evaluation projects on the World Bank and World Trade Organization. Lucy has a strong passion for foreign affairs, international development and politics. She won the right to speak via open audition. Lucy, you have the floor.
Okay, just testing this is on. We're all good, yes. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So I can see lots of hands were raised in opposition, but I'm here to convince you why you're all wrong and why we must support this side of the motion that the House should keep politics out of sport. Firstly, the main reason why politics must be kept out of sports is because sports is used as a facade for political regimes to commit terrible atrocities, and they use sports as a facade to cover that up. So that's why we need to keep politics out of sports. So first of all, just to begin on the sort of similarities between politics and sports, both of them are about scoring goals against your opponents. If you've ever watched PMQs on a Wednesday afternoon at 12 o'clock, you will see the Conservatives and the Labour Party battling it out. Or in the Champions League final coming up in June, you'll see Dortmund, sorry, I'm not German, Dortmund, I don't know how to pronounce that, and Real Madrid battling it out too. So both politics and sports are about beating your opponents. But I think we should keep politics to the chamber and sports to the pitch, because when the two are mixed, the results can be very ugly. So I'm just going to focus this debate on sports washing, and with specific reference to Russia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and China, with a short mention of Arsenal at the very end. So with regards to Russia, there is a state-controlled gas giant called Gazprom, which was one of the main sponsors of the UEFA. But in February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Gazprom was made to drop out of this important sponsorship, as it should, because why should the UEFA be seen to endorse Russia's invasion of Ukraine? However, one issue occurred, which was that the Belgrade Red Star football team from Serbia, they continued to have a front-of-shirt sponsorship from Gazprom. So even though Russia was not allowed via Gazprom to sponsor the UEFA, they did so quite sneakily through sponsoring a Serbian football team. The main issue with that is that any of their football fans or anyone watching that particular game might inadvertently be seen to be complicit with Gazprom, and we often see a halo effect whereby you may develop positive feelings or positive feelings of something of a positive association. So because Gazprom was there in the Champions League, which everyone loves, you might inadvertently start to think Gazprom is associated with that. Then if we look at the Russian F1 driver Nikita Mazepin, who was dismissed from Haas Formula One team in 2022 due to his father's close connections with Vladimir Putin as an oligarch, they were made to sort of leave the Haas Formula One team, which I believe that was the correct thing to do, because had they stayed, F1 would have appeared to be complicit with Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Isn't that in of itself a political act? Removing him from Haas is a political act, so you are supporting politics in sport by removing him.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think it can be interpreted both ways. So it's quite an ambiguous term of politics, as we discussed. But I think having sorry, I will come back to you. But I shall continue. Also, as we know, with the Chelsea, the previous Chelsea Football Club owner, he was sanctioned by the UK government and had to sell Chelsea Football Club, and that was sort of seen as a way to keep the politics of Russia out of football. Now, going to Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia has recently turned to a takeover of sports in order to legitimize its regime. This mainly started in 2014 when global oil prices dropped by 70% due to excess supply. And this catalysed the need for Saudi Arabia to start reducing its reliance on oil rents, through which it spearheaded the Vision 2030 plan for economic diversification. And as I'm sure you're all aware, Saudi Arabia, through its Sovereign Wealth Fund of £514 billion, has now signed Ronaldo, who is now the highest paid athlete in the world, earning £173 million a year. Saudi Arabia also established the Live Golf tournament, which is a direct competitor of PGA. And this is all funded through its public investment fund, which is funded by oil profits. But why is this such a controversial issue? Well, if you look at the news today, the 9th of May, you will see that in order for Saudi Arabia to build its Vision 2030, its NEOM city, the Saudi Arabia authorities actually gave permission to kill anyone that would stand in the way of it's a city called The Line, like a very horizontal line. They've had to clear land in order to build that, and some people refused to leave their homes, and they were actually killed. So the point being is Saudi Arabia is using sports washing to cover its political regime. And so as such, I think Saudi Arabia should not be allowed to hide behind the sports as a facade. If we go to Qatar, which was previously mentioned, in 2010, Qatar won the bid to host FIFA in 2022. However, there are many speculations that this was fueled by bribery and corruption, with allegations that FIFA officials were offered bribes for exchange of their votes. One of the main issues with Qatar is that an investigation by The Guardian found that 6,500 migrant workers died in constructing the FIFA World Cup infrastructure, and these were from 5 main countries: India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. And so Qatar was able to use the FIFA World Cup as a facade to cover its exploitation of the migrant workers. And furthermore, as we know, Qatar, it's illegal to be homosexual there. And when our England captain, Harry Kane, wanted to wear the One Love armband, he was not allowed as a captain. And he was told that by wearing it, he would have a sanction imposed on him. And so the point being is that these sensitivities cause great conflict of interest and should be kept out of football, and again, politics should be kept out of sports. Now, if we turn to China, we're going to have a slightly different approach of soft power. You can stand, but you might be more comfortable sitting. So China uses soft power to build stadiums. It's built lots of stadiums across the African continent. For example, most recently, it won contracts to build stadiums in Kenya and Tanzania for the African Cup of Nations, which will be hosted in 2027. Don't be fooled, it's not because China wants to support the development of African athletes or to support the African Cup of Nations. It's actually a soft power tool to gain diplomatic clout and influence across the African continent, and mainly in order to access natural resources. So for example, 8 of the 14 largest cobalt mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo are owned by China. And China's Belt and Road Initiative as well has indebted a lot of African nations. For example, Zambia has had to recently default on its debt, and most of its commercial debt is owed to Chinese lenders. If you look at Uganda, its one international airport, Entebbe, has been threatened and seized by China due to being unable to pay back its loans. So the stadiums being built across Africa by China are a soft power initiative, which is why politics should be kept out of sports, because China is able to exert soft power for its own political gains as opposed to the benefit of those African nations. And my final point is with regards to Arsenal Football Club. So back in 2018, Rwanda had sponsored Arsenal Football Club with the slogan "Visit Rwanda." And that was very controversial back then, 6 years ago. Why? Because one of the most sort of affluent football clubs in the world, Arsenal, was being funded and sponsored by one of the lowest income countries in the world, where in Rwanda there's a GDP per capita of $960 a year, which works out to just $20 a week. So it's very controversial. Why is Rwanda sponsoring Arsenal? And then it gets even more controversial now, where Arsenal was promoting a Visit Rwanda slogan, and then the UK government has recently planned to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, which has received a lot of backlash. So there's also a lot of hypocrisy in the way that we see sports and politics being played out together. But the overall conclusion, as I know I'm running out of time, is that politics should be kept out of sports because it's used as a facade for political regimes to commit atrocious acts. Thank you.